Moving to this town was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where our family could finally be at peace. But peace was the last thing we found. We uncovered traditions that felt strange and unsettling, like something pulled from a dark fairy tale. It was the well that people whispered about the most, a place where dreams and darkness seemed to mix. And then there was our neighbor, with her too wide smile and cryptic warnings, who left us wondering if we'd just stepped into a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. Our last argument still echoed in my mind, a ghostly whisper that refused to fade. Kira's voice had trembled as she stared off into the distance, barely audible when she said, Maybe we need a fresh start. A new place." It wasn't the first time we'd considered leaving. We'd flirted with the idea after every cold word, every bitter silence, every slammed door that seemed to erode whatever we'd once cherished. But this time, the exhaustion in Kira's eyes mirrored the weight I felt. Our love, once a fierce blaze, had dulled into hollow routines, gestures that felt more like going through the motions than anything genuine. Countless nights I spent lying awake, replaying memories of better days, trying to pinpoint the moment when things had shifted. We'd started as two people who couldn't get enough of each other. But somewhere along the line, laughter had been replaced by tense words, and affection had dwindled into frustration over the smallest of things. Our home, once filled with warmth and laughter, had turned cold, each wall now seeming to echo with the bitterness that had crept in over time. And it wasn't just us. Lily, our daughter, felt it too. She was no longer the bright, carefree child she'd been. She'd started retreating into herself, her once vibrant spirit dulled by the tension that filled every room. When she laughed, it sounded forced and distant, as if she feared breaking the uneasy silence that hung between us. Every argument seemed to push her further away, and watching her withdraw was like seeing a gap widen that we couldn't bridge. It was in these moments, as we watched her retreat, that Kira and I finally came to an unspoken decision. Maybe a new town could give us a chance to start over. The drive felt endless, with a silence between us that grew heavier with each passing mile. Our city disappeared in the rearview mirror, replaced by stretches of farmland and isolated houses that seemed to get sparser as we drove. It felt like a symbolic journey, leaving behind everything familiar and stepping into the unknown. Kira would occasionally glance at me, her eyes searching, as if trying to find reassurance that this was indeed the right decision. But neither of us looked back. We kept our eyes on the road, our hopes tempered with caution, as if the future could bring salvation or sink us further. As night fell, we arrived. The town was small and secluded, nestled between vast fields and bordered by dense pine forests that towered over everything. The silence was unsettling, as if the whole place had been frozen in time. Our new house was modest, a little old-fashioned but cozy, with a white picket fence surrounding a neat yard. Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of the fence, and for the first time in ages, I saw a glimmer of happiness in her face. Kira, too, softened as she looked at our new home, maybe even daring to imagine that here we could finally breathe. We'd barely settled when we met her, the woman who would unknowingly twist our lives in ways we couldn't foresee. She appeared suddenly, an older woman with a wide smile that lingered a bit too long. Balancing a plate of cookies, she introduced herself as Margaret, the town's unofficial greeter, it seemed. Her voice was melodic yet oddly unsettling, like an off-key lullaby, as she welcomed us with open arms. Margaret's gaze drifted to Lily, and there was something strange in her eyes, a gleam that made me uneasy, as if she saw something in our daughter that we couldn't. Her smile grew wider, and for a fleeting moment I felt a deep, instinctual urge to reach out and pull Lily closer, away from this woman who felt almost too interested. Then, as if discussing the weather, Margaret said, "Have you been to the well yet?" Her eyes stayed fixed on Lily, making her question feel more loaded than casual. She spoke of the well as though it were a sacred place, a part of the town that held immense, almost magical significance, a place where wishes were made, where lives changed. Kira and I exchanged a skeptical glance. Margaret's reverence felt strange, maybe even a bit disturbing, but we brushed it off as small-town eccentricity. After all, what harm could come from a harmless old well? Yet as Margaret turned to leave, her wide smile lingered in the air, like a shadow refusing to fade. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her words, something we weren't seeing. In the following days, we focused on settling in, getting used to the quiet rhythms of our new home. The locals greeted us warmly, their smiles welcoming, their gestures friendly, almost too friendly. But beneath their kindness was something else, a strange intensity in their expressions, a sameness that began to feel unsettling. They were helpful, always eager to make us feel at home, but their warmth had an odd edge to it, as though they were all sharing a secret we weren't yet privy to. Still, we told ourselves it was nothing, just a quirk of small-town life. The little shops that lined the streets, the handcrafted trinkets and baked goods, the postcard-perfect charm of it all, lulled us into a sense of comfort. But even as we walked through the town, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, that we were being observed by eyes hidden in the shadows. And then there was the well. Margaret's words lingered in my mind, a whisper in the background of my thoughts. The well was everywhere we went, mentioned casually in passing, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. It was as if the town's life revolved around it, with stories woven into every conversation. A cashier mentioned how the well had helped her, her smile unnaturally wide as she spoke of the miracles it had brought into her life. The stories varied. Some claimed the well had saved marriages, others that it had brought prosperity, and still others that it had healed sicknesses that doctors couldn't cure. At first, Kira and I laughed it off as quaint folklore, but the more we heard, the harder it became to ignore. It was as if everyone was part of a secret they were eager to share, but not completely. They spoke with a strange certainty, a quiet reverence that made their words hard to dismiss. One evening, curiosity got the best of me, and I mentioned the well to Kira. She let out a nervous laugh, her eyes reflecting the same unease that had begun to grow in me. "Yeah, I've noticed," she said, her voice strained. "It's like they're all repeating the same story, over and over." We tried to laugh it off, but a chill settled over us, a sense of dread that crept in like a shadow we couldn't quite shake. And then, things began to change. At first it was just little inconveniences, a misplaced item here, a strange noise there. But as the days passed, the disturbances grew, small hints of a lurking darkness. My hours at work were cut unexpectedly. Our savings dwindled faster than they should have, and bizarre errors in our bank accounts left us questioning our own sanity. And Lily, sweet, vibrant Lily, she was changing too. The spark in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a vacant stare that made my heart ache. She became quieter, more withdrawn, as though she were slipping into a world beyond our reach, a place filled with things we couldn't see. It was like watching her drift away from us, lost in some otherworldly trance. Our new life, once filled with hope, turned into something heavier, darker. The house grew colder, its shadows longer, and once again, Kira and I found ourselves slipping back into old habits, arguments, frustration, bitterness poisoning the air like a slow, creeping toxin. One night, after a particularly heated argument, I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed out into the cold night, the chill hitting me like a slap. My mind was a chaotic mess of anger and confusion, and I found myself wandering, my feet leading me to the edge of the forest, to the path that would take me to the well. The trees loomed tall and silent, their branches casting twisted shadows in the moonlight. And as I approached the well, I felt it, a pull, a magnetic force that seemed to draw me closer. The stone structure stood silently, ancient and worn, covered in moss, hidden among the trees as if guarding something dark and secret. I peered into its depths, feeling a quiet desperation well up inside me. The stories, the whispers, could they be true? Without thinking, I tossed a coin into the well, my whisper a soft plea into the darkness, a wish for peace, for happiness, for our family to be whole again. The well's silence was my only answer, but as I turned to leave, I felt something, a presence, watching, waiting. Did you feel the chill? What do you think lies hidden in the well's depths? Comment with your theories, and stay tuned as we dive deeper into this eerie tale in part 2. The following morning, everything felt different. The air seemed lighter, as if some unseen weight had lifted. Kira greeted me with a smile that was genuine, her usual tension replaced by a warmth I hadn't seen in years. We shared a quiet breakfast, the kind of peaceful meal that felt like a memory from a time when things were simpler. Even Lily seemed happier, running through the yard with a lightness in her step, a grin spreading across her face that melted my heart. The change felt surreal, almost too good to be true. Our home, which had once felt suffocating, now seemed filled with laughter and peace. For the first time, I dared to believe the stories I'd heard. Maybe the well really did possess some kind of strange power, a magic that had finally given us the life we had always wanted. Days turned into weeks, and everything seemed to fall into place. My work hours returned to normal, our finances stabilized, and the arguments between Kira and me became a distant memory. It was as though the town itself was embracing us, drawing us into its fold as if we had always belonged here. But beneath the newfound happiness, a sense of unease lingered, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind that refused to be silenced. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Every time I walked through town, the neighbors' smiles felt a little too knowing, their eyes lingering just a bit too long. And whenever I crossed paths with Margaret, her gaze would hold mine for a moment longer than necessary, a silent, mocking reminder of my visit to the well. One night, Lily woke us with a scream. She was shaking, her tiny body huddled under the covers, her eyes wide with terror. She clung to me, pointing towards the window, insisting she'd seen something lurking outside, watching her. We tried to comfort her, to reassure her that it was just a bad dream, but the fear in her eyes was real, a deep primal terror that went beyond childish nightmares. The incident left us shaken, and as the nights passed, the nightmares became more frequent. Lily would wake up in a cold sweat, her cries filling the house as she pointed to the shadows that only she seemed to see. Her laughter faded, replaced by a haunting silence that filled the empty spaces of our home. And then one night, she vanished. Her bed was empty, the window left open, curtains billowing in the cold breeze. Panic gripped us as we searched the house, calling her name, our voices echoing through the empty rooms. We ran through the town, knocking on doors, pleading for help. But the townsfolk were indifferent, their faces blank as they murmured words of reassurance that felt hollow, rehearsed. They offered no help, no answers, just that same unsettling smile. Margaret's words came back to me, echoing in my mind. The well grants wishes, but it takes something in return. A chill ran through me as the weight of those words sank in. I knew, in the depths of my heart, where I would find Lily, the well, the price I hadn't understood. It had been her. Desperation drove me back to the forest, my heart pounding as I stumbled through the dark, shadowed path that led to the well. The moon was high, casting an eerie glow on the ancient stones that encircled it. And there, waiting by the edge of the well, stood Margaret, her smile sharper than ever, her eyes glinting with a cold satisfaction. "You knew, didn't you?" I choked out, rage and fear twisting my voice. "You knew what the well would take from me." She tilted her head, her smile widening. "The well gives, and the well takes. It's always been that way. You wanted peace, happiness, and so the well gave you that, but there is always a cost. Every wish demands a sacrifice." Her words cut through me, a brutal truth that I couldn't deny. My wish had brought us happiness, but it had taken Lily in return. I fell to my knees, my heart shattering as I realized the depth of my mistake. I had been so blinded by desperation, so consumed by the need to fix our broken lives, that I had unknowingly traded my daughter for a fleeting peace. "Is there a way to get her back?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. "Please, tell me there's a way." Margaret's smile faded, her eyes darkening. "There's always a way. But be warned, the well doesn't take kindly to broken promises. To reclaim what it has taken, you must give it something else in return, and the price will be steep." Desperation clawed at me, a desperation that went beyond reason or fear. I didn't care what it would take. I would do anything to bring Lily back. With a trembling voice I asked, "What must I give?" Margaret looked at me with a kind of pity, as if she had seen countless others make the same mistake. "The well demands more than just a token or trinket. It requires a life, a soul, yours, or someone else's." Her words echoed in the silence, a choice that was both impossible and inevitable. I could feel the weight of it settling over me, a choice that would bind me to the well forever. But in that moment, I didn't care. I would do anything, pay any price, if it meant bringing my daughter back. I knelt beside the well, the cold stones pressing into my skin as I whispered my plea into the darkness, offering myself in exchange for Lily. The silence stretched on, an eternity of waiting, and then I felt it, a shift, a presence. And when I looked up, Margaret was gone. When I returned home, Lily was there, sleeping peacefully in her bed, as though she had never been gone. Relief washed over me, a flood of gratitude and love that drowned out everything else. But as I looked into her eyes the next morning, I realized something was different. Her laughter was hollow, her smile empty. She was there, yet somehow she wasn't. The days that followed were filled with a quiet dread, a fear that gnawed at me with each passing hour. I had reclaimed my daughter, but she wasn't the same. It was as if a piece of her had been left behind, a part of her soul trapped in the darkness of the well. And then, one evening, I saw her, Margaret's child, a young girl, radiant and full of life, running through the town square with a joy that was almost blinding, and I realized, with a cold, sickening certainty, that my wish had cost more than I could ever comprehend. Now, as I stand on the front porch, watching a new family move into the house across the street, I wonder, is it time for someone else to make a wish? If this strange mystery has you on edge, comment below with your thoughts and theories. And don't forget to join us for the final part of the tale. Days passed in a fog, the memory of the well and the bargain I'd made haunting my every thought. Lily was with us again, yet she was a stranger in her own home. She walked through the house quietly, her once joyful laughter replaced by an eerie silence. Her eyes, once vibrant and curious, had turned dull and distant, as if a part of her was somewhere else, somewhere unreachable. The guilt of what I had done weighed on me like an anchor, pulling me down, draining me of any hope. Kira noticed the change too. She'd often catch Lily staring out the window, her gaze fixed on the edge of the forest. When she tried to engage with her, Lily would respond in short, empty words, as if speaking from a place far away. Each attempt to reach her was met with an impassable barrier, an invisible wall that seemed to separate her from us. Kira grew anxious, her frustration turning to fear. She sensed, as I did, that something was terribly wrong, but she didn't know the truth. She didn't know the price I had paid. One evening, as we sat in silence over dinner, Kira finally voiced the question I'd been dreading. "What happened to her?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace that clung to us. I hesitated, my heart pounding as I looked into her eyes. How could I tell her the truth? How could I admit that I had traded part of our daughter's soul for a fleeting moment of happiness? Instead, I reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly, trying to reassure her with a lie. "She's just adjusting. It's a new place, a new town. She'll be herself again soon." But even as I said the words, I knew they were empty. There was no soon. The Lily we knew was gone, and in her place was a shadow, a hollow shell. As the weeks wore on, my sense of dread grew stronger. I began to hear whispers at night, faint voices that drifted through the walls of our home, their words unintelligible but filled with an unmistakable malice. Shadows seemed to stretch longer, darkening the corners of the house, as if something unseen lurked just beyond the edges of my vision. Each night, the whispers grew louder, their presence more insistent, until I could no longer ignore them. One night, unable to bear the haunting silence any longer, I returned to the well. The forest was deathly quiet, the trees standing tall and ominous against the night sky. The path to the well felt different, as though the ground itself were shifting beneath my feet. When I finally reached the well, I felt a familiar chill wash over me. The air was thick, filled with the weight of something ancient, something powerful. I knelt by the well, my heart pounding as I stared into its depths. The darkness seemed endless, swallowing the faint glimmer of moonlight that fell upon it. I whispered into the void, my voice trembling. "What have I done?" The silence stretched on, and for a moment I thought I was alone. But then a voice echoed from the depths, soft and mocking. "You made a wish, and wishes come at a price." It was Margaret's voice, cold and detached, carrying with it the weight of countless broken promises. I clenched my fists, anger and desperation boiling within me. "Give her back. Give me my daughter, my real daughter, back." A cruel laugh echoed up from the well, sending shivers down my spine. "The well doesn't reverse its gifts. What's done is done. You wanted happiness, and the well granted it, but the well always keeps its share." Despair gripped me, and I felt a hollowness open up within me, a void that threatened to consume everything. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "I'll do anything." The laughter faded, replaced by a heavy silence, and then, as if in response to my plea, I saw something. A shadow shifting within the well, a dark figure rising from the depths. It was a shape, indistinct and formless, but it held an aura of malice, a presence that felt as though it had been waiting for this moment. The figure spoke, its voice a raspy whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You wish to break the bond?" I nodded, fear and hope clashing within me. "Yes, I'll give anything." The figure's eyes, empty and dark, fixed on me. "The price will be another soul. The well has claimed your daughter, and only another life will release her." I felt the world spin around me, the enormity of the choice crushing down on me. Another soul, another life in exchange for hers. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Could I take someone else's life to save my daughter? Could I condemn another innocent for my own selfish desire? The figure seemed to sense my hesitation, and its voice grew softer, almost soothing. The well does not care whose soul it claims. It only demands payment. Choose wisely. I stumbled back from the well, my mind reeling as I grappled with the impossible choice. The weight of the decision settled over me, a suffocating presence that followed me as I made my way back through the forest. The trees loomed taller, their shadows stretching like dark fingers, as if they too knew the bargain I was facing. When I returned home, I found Kira waiting for me, her face drawn and pale. She looked at me, her eyes filled with questions, but I had no answers to give. Instead, I held her close, feeling the fragility of our lives, the sense that we were standing on the edge of something dark and irreversible. That night, as I lay awake, my mind turned to the new family that had moved in down the street. A mother, a father, and their young daughter, laughing and playing in their front yard as they settled into their new home. They were strangers, innocent and oblivious to the darkness that lurked within the town, to the secret that bound them to this place. Could I? The thought was abhorrent, a sickness that twisted within me. But it lingered, a whisper that refused to fade. It would be so easy, a simple trade, another child, another life in exchange for lilies. The next morning, I walked down the street, my heart heavy with the weight of my guilt. I watched the new family from a distance, the way they smiled, the way the little girl's laughter filled the air, pure and untainted by the darkness that had taken root within my own home. And in that moment, I knew that I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to condemn another family to the same fate, to trap them in a cycle of despair and regret. I had made my choice, and I would bear the consequences. I had lost my daughter, and no amount of bargaining would change that. But as I turned to walk away, I felt a presence behind me, a cold, familiar gaze that sent shivers down my spine. I looked back, and there, standing at the edge of the street, was Margaret, her eyes glinting with a cruel satisfaction. "Leaving so soon?" she asked, her voice a mocking echo of my own thoughts. "The well always finds a way, you know. You may choose not to act, but someone else will. The cycle never ends." I walked away, her words ringing in my ears, knowing that I could never truly escape. The well's shadow stretched over us all, an ancient curse that bound the town in its grip. And as I reached my front door, I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my story was just another chapter in the well's endless tale. A story of wishes granted and lives taken, a tale of hope turned to horror. As the nights grew darker and Lily's hollow gaze haunted every corner of our home, I understood that the well had claimed more than just her. It had taken us all, piece by piece, leaving us trapped in a life that was no longer our own. And now, as I look out my window at the family down the street, I wonder how long it will be before they, too, hear the whispers in the night. How long before they find themselves drawn to the well, lured by promises of happiness that come at a terrible price. The well waits, its depths silent and endless, patient in its hunger. And I know that someday someone else will make a wish, someone else will pay the price. What would you do if faced with such a choice? Could you condemn another for your own peace? Share your thoughts below, and if you dare, join us as we uncover more dark secrets lurking in the shadows. Subscribe to Nightmare Narratives, and let us guide you deeper into the unknown.